Okay, for lesson 5 of our summer school, we are thinking about directory sites. And it's a good idea to be on a directory site or two if you're in independent practice. Obviously, they can be a good source of referrals, but on top of that, they give you a home on the internet that you can direct people to before you get your own website up and running. They show up in search engines and they can give you a real boost of credibility. There are a myriad of directory sites to choose from. And the good news is that most of them offer a free trial, so you can test which ones work for you. What I do, and what I'm going to talk through today, is I create a perfect profile, which I save in a Google Doc, and then I just copy and paste it into different platforms that I want to try out. So at a minimum, I'd recommend trying out Psychology Today, Counselling Directory, and Find My Psychologist. But it's worth doing a search for psychologist or therapist near me and seeing what directory sites are dominating the search results near you, because it is different postcode to postcode. And you really want to make sure you're on those sites that are coming top for your area. So for example, where I am, if I type in psychologist in Tunbridge Wells, the first results are from Harley Therapy, Psychology Today and Counselling Directory. So if I was starting out, those would be places that I'd really want to consider. There are some basic principles for a good directory site profile that if you follow, you're going to be streets ahead of most people out there, because most profiles on directory sites are really awful. So I'm going to talk you through some top tips, and then if you're in summer school, you will be able to use my template, which I've put underneath this lesson, in order to craft your directory site profile. Okay, so top tips. Write as though you're speaking to a potential client. And sometimes, if this is difficult and it doesn't come so naturally to you, it's actually worth recording your side of a conversation with a new client and looking at the phrases that you use and what you say and how you explain who you are and what you do when you're really in front of somebody. For me, I can do this as a bit of an imagination exercise. So as I'm writing, I just imagine that I'm speaking to a real person that's come to me and asking, how can you help me with X, Y, or Z? But I know that that doesn't come naturally for everybody. So sometimes it's about recording those real life interactions, because if you've been a therapist for a while, you're good at this. It's just sometimes difficult to get it out on paper. Second tip, specialise. You can't speak to everybody in your profile. You're just going to blend into the background. So make sure that you pick a particular client group to speak to. This is something we talk about a lot in Start and Grow. Deciding on that specialism and who your ideal client is really important. But for now, just pick, your favourite type of client, the people that you've worked with most successfully in the past, and go with that. Now, when it comes to talking about your approach, say a few confident lines about this. Let them know about your experience and literally how you will help them. But don't go into reams and reams about, my unique approach to therapy is X, Y, or Z. No, people can't make sense of that. If they've got no prior experience of therapy, it's likely that every single word you use will just come across as jargon to them. Even though it's not to us, I would know what you mean. But we're thinking about the ideal client, and if they haven't had therapy before, things like, safe space even, just sound like rubbish to them. So try and steer clear of that sort of thing and just talk about, I use my 25 years of experience in the NHS working in this area to help you overcome the problems that you're facing with X, Y, and Z. I offer, and then maybe something like talking therapies like CBT and trauma-focused therapies like EMDR. That would be enough. You really don't need to overwhelm people with more, which is probably most often more written for our peers than it is for the ideal client. So steer clear of that and just a few confident lines. Similarly, don't list every piece of training that you've ever done. Give your core qualification and then maybe one or two other things which really say something about the way that you work. So for example, if you are EMDR accredited, that's probably worth mentioning. But if you did, a 2-day course in CFT, that's probably not worth mentioning. But if you've done the CFT diploma, maybe that is. So, keep it to core qualification plus maybe one or two other things if they're really important to the way that you work. Have an easy booking system and make sure it's really explicit. So if the person needs to send an email to book with you, tell them to do that. If they need to phone, tell them to do that. Give one way of doing it. If you've set up something like Calendly or Acuity, or you're using the write-up booking system that we've talked about in the tools lesson, then tell them about that and tell them exactly how to do it, and tell them exactly what will happen next as well. So if you offer a free consultation, tell them that that's what's going to happen, and then afterwards you will follow up with your recommendations. However you do it, just make it really clear what needs to happen next and what will happen immediately afterwards. Make your fees really clear. None of this kind of sliding scale, none of this, inquire and then I'll tell you the fee. No. People get really anxious about fees. Understandably, put yourself in their shoes. When I've been inquiring about therapy, the thing that is on my mind is, can I afford this? And what am I going to pay over the next kind of 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, however long I think I'm going to need therapy for. And it's terrifying. People do not want to have a conversation, get to the end of it and have to tell you that they can't afford you. Horrible for everybody. Don't put anybody through it. Make your fees really explicit. And use a professional headshot if you've got one. And if you don't have one, put that on your list of things to get sorted, because people need to feel that they have a sense of who you are and what your presence is like, and the photo really communicates that. And it's very difficult to get right on your own. You need to make sure that there are no weird shadows over your face and that you just look how you really look. So making sure that you've got a really good quality image will really help. There's lots of evidence that people do use those to make decisions about who they contact. So make sure you've got the best image you can possibly get. And I really recommend going to local networking events and finding a local photographer to do that for you. It's not that expensive and it can make a really big difference to your profile success. So overall, the key here is to write your profile for an overwhelmed potential client, not for your peers. We talk about this loads in Psychology Business School and especially in the Start and Grow program. And we spend a lot of time giving each other feedback on profiles, because even I struggled to do this after years and years of helping other people with their own. I still struggle to get mine right, because it's very difficult to see your profile through the eyes of a potential client when you've got all your own stuff in your own head going on about it. So share what you've got for feedback is my biggest piece of advice. And don't worry if you need to tweak it a few times to get it right, because we all do. So like I said, if you're in summer school, then there's a template below this lesson that you can use to create a great profile. And remember, it doesn't have to be long to be effective. So your task for this week: pick one photo of yourself that you like, or one that is good enough, and use that for now. If you've got a professional headshot, great. If not, get to local networking and try and get one sorted out as soon as possible. Write your profile in a Google or Word document using the template that I've given you here, and share it for feedback in our summer school community. Google psychologists near me or therapists near me and note down what directory sites come up, and then sign up to all of them and track where inquiries come from. If you're on holiday at the moment, which I hope some of you are, then you can save your profile as a draft and set it live when you are ready to come back in September. But make sure that you've got some way of tracking where did my inquiries come from, and is this profile worth continuing with? And then you only continue with the ones that bring you something useful. But I would give them 3 to 6 months to produce a result, because it does take a bit of time often to get it right. Okay, 30 minutes, go!